Hello, Patriots, and welcome again to the channel. Well, this week we're going to do a few different things. First of all, I'm going to do a personal message to the General Assembly of Kentucky. Second, we're going to talk about the impeachment of Kentucky Governor Beshear. Third, we're going to do the legislative roundup, talking about these are the things that are up for a vote in Frankfort and what they have already passed. And then we'll talk about the last week of our ongoing contest. But first, I want to do a personal message to the members of the Kentucky General Assembly. For those of you in the public who may not realize this, for the past 12 years, I have served as the volunteer chaplain to the Kentucky Capitol. It has been my passion, my life's work, seek God's face every single day asking, what is it that I can give to these people to be a blessing to them? And what is incredibly disheartening, heartbreaking, and frustrating all at the same time is there's a lot of them up there right now who are very mad at me. And here's the reason they are mad at me is because I mentioned in last week's video what was in some of the bills that they were going to vote on. I didn't make the people mad. What was in the bills made the people mad. And the people have a right to know what is in these bills. I think something has been forgotten in this conversation is that you can be against a piece of legislation and you can still love the person who wrote it or voted for it. And there is a big disconnect there. To be honest, I think there's some evil spirits behind this that are trying to connect these two things. You can be for and love a person. That doesn't mean every single thing that they do you're going to approve of. And there's a lot of things in those bills which did some good stuff. That's great. But there was also some things in those bills which were very bad pieces of legislation, and they needed to be called out. So we're going to go over those this week, what they did actually wind up passing with all of the amendments that changed some of the wording. I think you'll find that very interesting. I want to reassure every single member of the legislature, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I love you all. I don't necessarily love everything that you're voting for, and I hope you can understand the difference between the two. Well, now with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the things that are going on in the Capitol, specifically the possible impeachment of Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. The impeachment of Andy Beshear. Is it going to happen? Well, it's one step closer. The Kentucky House of Representatives has formed a committee to look into impeachment. Should it happen? Is it justified? Here are some quick reasons why it should happen. First of all, on Easter Sunday, he violated the constitutional freedom of religion by threatening churchgoers with 1 year in jail for going to church in person that day. Oh, on that day, you could still go to Kroger, you can still go to Walmart, Lowe's, you can go anywhere else, you just can't go to church. That is arbitrary, which breaks Section 2 of the Kentucky Constitution, and it's violating the freedom of religion, which is violating Section 1 of the Kentucky Constitution, in addition to the national Constitution. He also issued a decree saying that you're not allowed to protest against him up at the Capitol building. A federal court ruled that that is violating of the Constitution. He violated our freedom of speech. He also issued a decree saying you're not allowed to have more than 8 people in your own house. He doesn't pay the rent. He doesn't get to say who's at my house. And that is a violation of the freedom of assembly, another First Amendment protected right of the people. Then remember his first travel ban where he says you can't leave or come into Kentucky because I say so. Another federal court ruled that he broke the Constitution by doing that and forced him to change. So these are multiple different times that he has broken the law. Many of them federal court cases have ruled on, and none of these have been negated or even addressed by the Kentucky State Supreme Court, which handled entirely separate issues. And just because one thing he did was ruled legal, that doesn't mean everything that he has ever done that wasn't addressed is also legal. So those are just a very few reasons. There is a bunch more, and I hope you'll contact your legislators to press for this. Until there is somebody in the country that has to answer for violating their people's rights and the Constitution, then they're going to simply embolden those to keep doing that whenever they want, because the worst thing that's ever going to happen to them is somebody says you can't do that particular thing again, but there's no justice for the things that they have already done wrong. Well, that's a little bit about impeachment. Now let's talk about what's going on in Frankfort, what bills are proposed, which ones are being passed in this week's legislative roundup. Let's start off by talking about two good bills. First of all, Senate Bill number 31. This is great. This would say that if you are a senior citizen, 65 or older, you don't have to pay property tax on the land that you are living on. I think that's great. They've already paid their fair share, and I think we should give a break to our senior citizens, so many of which are on fixed incomes anyway. Besides, property tax isn't a good idea. If you, let's say that your family's lived on the same piece of land since the time of George Washington, 1776, and you don't pay your property tax this year, guess who lives there next year? Not your family, somebody else. Do you realize what property tax means? It means that nobody owns their land, and all we are doing is renting our land from the government. This is a bad thing, and it needs to be removed. Senate Bill number 31 is a good step in the right direction for our senior citizens on this. I hope you'll contact your legislator about that and help them to support and get that one passed. Let's talk about another good one, and this is Senate Bill number 8. Right now in Kentucky law, did you know that the government can vaccinate you against your will? Yes, that's what I felt like when I first heard about this. Yes, they can do mandatory vaccinations. Well, Senate Bill 8 would say, no, sucker, you're not allowed to put things into my body that I do not want there. Talk about freedom of choice. I should be allowed to say what's injected into my body. Senate Bill 8 will say the government cannot do that anymore. You want to take a vaccine? Feel free, go for it. But you're no longer going to be forced to do that. There's some other bills which are addressing this as well. There's Senate Bill number 37, which says businesses can't require it. There's also Senate Bill 98 and 117, which says basically colleges and universities can't require that of every student. So these are some great bills, all talking about the same topic. I hope they'll pick and choose the different angles and put them all in one bill, and that'll get approved. Senate Bill 8 with these others, very positive, and I hope you'll contact your legislators and encourage them to support and to pass these into law. Now let's talk about some bad bills. I mean, just make you feel like this. Same thing, Daffy Duck, the patron saint of frustration. That's the way you're going to feel after I tell you about these bills. Let's talk about Senate Bill number 22. This is a dog of a bill. Senate Bill 22 would say that we're going to spend $500,000 of your money to put a decoration in the Kentucky Capitol building. Now think about this. At a time when we're having trouble paying the unemployment insurance because the governor illegally borrowed $750 million to have to pay that. We have trouble paying the teachers' unemployment insurance, retirement, which we promised that we would pay them. We're having trouble finding money for so many important and vital programs. Why would we spend $500,000 to put a decoration, which is a statue, in the Capitol building? Remember, the statue that was removed earlier was Jefferson Davis, where Governor Beshear ordered that statue removed. One, without anybody approving that, by the way. He ordered it removed before that was voted on. Number two, he gave $250,000 for its removal to his campaign contributors, and it was a no-bid contract, meaning nobody else in the state was even allowed to bid on this. He gives $250,000 to his campaign contributors to start doing the job, and they started doing it before there was any contract and before it was approved. And it was a job that really should have cost about $5,000, and yet his campaign contributors got $225,000 to do that. That's another reason possibly to impeach this guy for corruption and violation of ethics. But there's now a hole where that statue used to be. If they want to replace the statue, I have no problem with putting another statue in there of some notable Kentucky citizen. We have so many we could choose from, but it should not be done with the people's money. It should be private funds. We don't need to spend $500,000 on a decoration when there's so many other important things to do. It's crazy that that's even being proposed. Let's talk about another dog of a bill, and I mean dog of a bill too, and that is Senate Bill number 59, which would say that you are not allowed, if you are a pet store, you're not allowed to sell dogs, cats, or bunny rabbits because you can only sell ones that come from the shelters. And those you can sell, but you couldn't sell some from breeders. But what if I'm a little kid and I don't want a used dog? What if I want to get a new puppy dog? You're not allowed to do that. You can only get ones from a shelter. I have no problem with shelter dogs. I have 2 dogs. We got both of them from a shelter. I got 2 bunny rabbits. I got both of them from shelters. But you know what? Industry should be free. I'm tired of the government controlling every part of our lives. Where you can breathe, where you can be, how you have to breathe, how many people can be in your own home, and where I can buy a rabbit. Get out of every part of our lives and let the country and the people take care of themselves. This would be good government. Please knock down this bill. That's Senate Bill 59, a dog of a bill that says you can only get a used dog unless you get something from a shelter. So that's some of the bills that are up for a vote at this time. 2 good ones, 2 bad ones. And now let's end up talking about the 2 bills that we mentioned last week that have now been passed into law. I know a lot of you right now are like, oh my word, I watched last week's video. There was crazy things in those bills. Please tell me they didn't pass those. They put some amendments in there. Some things were added, some things were taken out. Let's now look right on the Capitol website and see the final version of the bill, and you can decide what you're going to do about it. So first, let's look at House Bill number 1. It still has the exact same wording of the problem we pointed out last week. Notice what it says in House Bill 1 is starting in line number 14. It says that you can keep your business or school or whatever open as long as it meets or exceeds all applicable guidance issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or by the executive branch, whichever is least restrictive. So this is the official website of the Kentucky Capitol building saying that this is what you are allowed to do. You can stay open as long as you obey either the governor or the CDC, whichever one's least restrictive. What if the governor says, do whatever the CDC commands? We've seen Governor Beshear do that multiple times already this past year. And the problems with the CDC is the same as before. You have people out of state telling Kentuckians how they have to do everything. It should be Kentuckians who decide this, not people in another state. Number 2, we don't get any say on who is making up these rules in the CDC. Do you get to vote on who gets hired by the CDC? No, we don't. The Kentucky legislature does. No, doesn't. Nobody in Kentucky gets any say on who's going to be making up these regulations. You know what that is? That is administration without representation. And then after they make up rules, we don't get to vote on if that would be good for Kentucky or not. We're simply stuck obeying things people in another state decree, and we get no vote. That's not right. It should have been taken out of the bill. I can't believe that they approved that with that language in there. Originally, it also included churches. Fortunately, we had some of our legislators that fought to get that part taken out. I applaud and I thank every one of the legislators who fought and led the charge to have the churches taken out of here. There should have been more people who were fighting for that. I'm glad for those who did step up and did fight to take that out. I applaud you. So that's some trouble with House Bill 1. It's already been approved, so our only recourse, is to write a new bill and have that go through the process to take this part out. I hope you'll contact your legislator about that. Now let's look at the other big bill that they passed this past week, which is Senate Bill number 1. Again, we're here on the official Kentucky Capitol website, and notice what it says in this final version of the bill. Line number 12, section 3, okay? It says that the governor is going to have all of these different powers. Notice what it says in line 24, starting in paragraph C, okay? He may seize, take, or condemn property for the duration of the emergency and only for public use. So he can do this as long as it's during the emergency and for the public use. Well, what exactly can he do? Well, we go to the next page. Remember, it says he may seize or take the following property. Well, line 3 here, it says all means of transportation. He can take your car, your company car. If you got a private school, he can take all of your buses. He can take all means of transportation. If he wanted to take your kid's bicycle, it would fall under all means of transportation. He may take all means of communication. He can take your phone. He can take your stereo, because that's something, your radio, because that's a means of communication. He could take your television. That's a means for you to receive communications. It goes on to say he may take all stocks of fuel. Line 3, it just gets worse and worse. He can take all food, all the food in your refrigerator, he can take that. Hey, it's for the good of the Commonwealth, and I'm only doing it during this time of emergency. He can take all clothing. He can take every single stitch of clothing that you own. He can take all equipment, materials, medicines, everything in your medicine cabinet. We're taking that. It's for the good of everybody else. And all supplies, any supplies, that's basically a catch-all of anything. It doesn't stop there. All facilities, including buildings and plants. If you're a farmer, he can take all of your crops. He can take all of your buildings. That would include your business, your home. Would this include your church? I mean, it says all, without exception. He may seize or take all of this. Now, in lines 7 through 9, you'll see that it says here that compensation must be made for this. He has to pay you for it. But what if I didn't want him to take it in the first place? Because you'll see it says in line 10, what can he do with it? He can sell it, lend it, give it away, or distribute any of the property under paragraph C. Which, remember, up here, paragraph C is everything. What if I didn't want to sell my home? What if I didn't want to have every bit of clothing that I ever owned sold and taken away? I think the Republicans have lost sight of something here, is that you are not always going to have control of the legislature. Political winds change, and one day the liberals will once again have control. And we could foresee a governor who's abusing the people, and he can do it during the time of the emergency. And what if the legislature approves it? This is a big, giant, gaping hole for some unscrupulous people to greatly abuse the people of Kentucky. This has been in the law for years. Here was an opportunity to take that part out of the law, and they didn't, despite how many people contacted them on this. But this isn't the only bad part of this law. Let's go back to the screen and we'll look at another part. Now, if you do this, let's go down to page number 16. Notice what it says here at the bottom, starting in section 7 here, line 24. State administrators and all investigators shall have full police powers of peace officers, and the jurisdiction shall be coextensive with the state. Let's stop right there. First of all, state administrators. So here you have unelected bureaucrats are being given full police powers. That is not right. Notice what they can do with these powers. They may inspect any premises, any, where alcoholic beverages are manufactured, sold, stored. If it says any premises where alcohol is stored, that would include private people's homes now, wouldn't it? Or otherwise trafficked in without first obtaining a search warrant. This is something which is a horrible part in the legislation. You have here unelected bureaucrats are able to go any premises, is what it says, where alcohol is manufactured or even stored without a warrant. This is a violation of the people's basic rights. I don't even want the police to have that authority. Even the police should have to get a warrant to come into your residence, any premises. It doesn't say any except a private home. It does say any premises. This has been in the law for years. This bill was addressing this law. It was a beautiful opportunity to remove this bad part out of the law, and they refused to do it, even though we highlighted it last week, and I know a whole bunch of you commented on it and contacted them because they got mad at me for letting you know about it. Well, you know what? They approved it. So all we can do now is hope that we can get somebody to write a new bill to go back in and to address these problems with the bill. I had one legislator call me up and said, doesn't say that, when I was literally reading it to him, and you've now seen it for yourself on the final approved version on the Capitol website. So that's a little bit about the legislative roundup this week. And so let's end off talking about a contest. It's called the Home of the Brave contest. That's where you go to my Facebook or my Parler page, and you'll see on December the 31st, I put up a post about the Home of the Brave contest. You take a picture with you with the most patriotic thing that you have, and you post that in the comments of that post. And whoever gets the most likes is going to win the prize. The prize will be announced on January the 22nd's video, and you can either get a t-shirt that has the Patriot Point logo and the little man on there holding up the torch, or you can get a book that I've written called War of the Realms, Conquest and Consequences. It's about a country struggling for its freedom and the patriots that work to make that happen. So I look forward to seeing the patriotic things that you have. Make sure you tune in next week to find out what's going on in Frankfort. And remember, even if I'm against a piece of legislation, I can still love those who are for it. Well, until next week, stand strong and breathe free.